What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The old-fashioned way in the past, the approach to oxidized terminals was as simple as the plot of the story The Old Man and the Sea. If you saw oxides, you peeled them off with sandpaper, hammered the terminal tight, tightened it heartily, and if you were an aesthete, you smeared it all with solidol. Then I slowly came to realize that greasing the terminals with solidol is a mauvais. Other greases were used, some of which are really better for this, and there was a time when you still had to get solidol somewhere. The attitude to the reasons for this ugliness was simple. Where could one go? Contacts are supposed to oxidize, so it is an inevitable evil. However, especially advanced still rightly noted that it is worth paying attention to which terminal oxidizes faster, the plus or the minus terminal. Based on this observation, one could conclude that everything goes wrong. If the plus terminal oxidizes more, the battery is overcharged, if the minus terminal is undercharged. In the first case, the voltage regulator is almost always to blame, in the second case, the alternator. Or also the voltage regulator, but you have to look into it. Because it can also be a bad mass. The battery itself was not looked at for too long. It was still difficult to buy a new one, so in extreme case it was easier to find a battery man in some ATP, who would knock out new lead plates from a ZAL battery into the Moskvitchov battery. In such circumstances it was better not to know that the battery itself could be to blame for excessive oxidation of contacts. Otherwise one could lose sleep altogether. Nowadays, cars have become more complex, charging systems and batteries themselves have also changed, but terminals still oxidize sometimes. Partly that old rule, plus is overcharging, minus is undercharging, still holds true today, but finding the causes of too much oxidation can still take a long time. Let's see where to start and where to end it all. By hand and eye as 50 years ago, the search for the fault should begin with a basic cleaning under the hood. More precisely, with cleaning the terminals and the battery itself. How to clean terminals is a bit of a religious question. Someone advises to do it the old-fashioned way, with a metal brush and sandpaper. Of course, if 3-story layers of oxide have already been built around the terminals, there is no other way out. You will have to demolish all these structures mechanically. The main thing is not to overdo it and not to grind down the terminals too much. It is clear that some people put on a terminal block and screw a screw between it and the worn terminal for reliability, but this is not quite right. In this way, the contact can be made even worse, from which this system will oxidize even faster. So first it is better to try some gentler method. For example, with a rag and baking soda solution, a tablespoon of baking soda per glass of water is enough. And if the baking soda does not help, you will have to take a knife, sandpaper, and everything else with which you can scrape off oxides. The main thing to remember is that you should not water the battery with gasoline or any solvents. You can only make things worse. Then you can start cleaning the battery itself. There should be no dirt on it at all. We've already told you once about what leakage current and said that a dirty battery is the first step towards self-discharge. Now I will add, and to oxidize terminals, too. So we give it a good cleaning and check 2 things. The first is drainage. Oxides appear especially because too much electrolyte somehow gets on the surface of the battery and on the terminals. One of the causes of this mess is a clogged gas vent. The pressure inside the battery rises, and the electrolyte vapors are ready to literally climb into every crevice. And they climb through the plugs of the jars, if there are any, through small cracks near the terminals themselves. And if the situation is allowed to start at all or to allow a strong overcharge, when the electrolyte starts to boil, the gases can make such cracks in the battery case, which should not be there at all. So the case can burst. So we check the second thing, the integrity of the case. Of course, it must be intact. When cleaning the battery, the easiest thing to evaluate is the structure of the oxide itself. If it comes off quite easily, but appears loose, then the first thing to look at is all of the things I mentioned above. Such oxide indicates that for some reason there is too much electrolyte on the surface of the case. If externally the battery is intact and the drain is not clogged, you should think about the fact that the battery suffers from overcharging too often. In this case, due to the boiling of the electrolyte and the settling of its vapors on the body of the battery will be the same soft and loose oxide. Here, of course, It is desirable to take a voltmeter in your hands and check the voltage at the terminals when the engine is running. And different load, with consumers turned off and on. It is quite possible that the voltage will be excessive, and then you need to deal with this problem first. Solve it, and the terminals will not be so quickly overgrown with oxides. If the voltage is normal, you need to check the battery itself. One of the causes of overcharging is the destruction of one of the battery banks, more often, a simple short circuit. In this case, the electrolyte in the remaining cans may boil, as in overcharging, and the terminals in this case will also become overgrown with oxides very quickly. In all of the above cases, the amount of oxide is actually higher on the plus terminal. White or blue soft and fluffy oxide in this case is another reason to check if overcharging is occurring. Now let's move on to another kind of oxide, green and tough. The kind that can only be removed with sandpaper. A little more difficult, the minus terminal of the battery turns green more often. The main reason for the increase in the amount of such oxide is poor contact. However, it is necessary to make a reservation. The word bad in relation to the contact is very polysemantic. Therefore, you will have to check a lot of things. Let's start with the elementary, with checking the terminal itself. Just putting a wire on the terminal is not everything. Firstly, the terminal must be clean, and secondly, the terminal must be tightened after installation. If the contact on the terminal is not secure enough, its oxidation rate will increase significantly due to chronic overheating and parasitic currents. In addition, sparks and arcing can occur. These things destroy the terminal, making the contact even worse and oxidation more active. And don't forget that the battery itself should be fixed and the wires should be securely fastened, as they should be when factory assembled. For some reason, after removing and installing the battery, it is customary to throw it as it comes, especially if the battery is old and you have to carry it home often to recharge it. They say, what is unnecessary to spin? If in the evening anyway, drag it home and put it on charge. That's a big mistake. The unnecessary vibration of terminal blocks makes bad contact even worse, so you should not be lazy. Lazy car owners will always have oxides. However, in overzealous ones they are also possible, but for the opposite reason. Knocking on the terminal with a hammer and then loosening it in an attempt to remove it from the battery is a very bad habit, which leads to what was mentioned above. Microcracks appear, through which the electrolyte evaporates, especially if your hands are strong and your brain is weak. If the terminal is okay, check the earth. Weak contact of the mass can lead to almost the same consequences: overheating of the wire and the terminal, and as a consequence, oxidation of the terminal. Especially seriously need to check the power wire, if the car has some non-standard powerful consumers that can overload the wiring. For example, a subwoofer with an amplifier. You can even feel the wires. If they are hot, something is going wrong, and you need to deal with this problem. Oxidation of the terminal in this case is only a symptom, not the disease itself. And it is the disease that needs to be treated. The last thing is to check the alternator and the voltage at the terminals. If undercharging is detected, the minus terminal in dense oxide will be inevitable. And lastly, I will say, it is very important to realize that the appearance of any deposits on the terminals is a sign of malfunction. No oxide should be there. And it's okay if the cause occurs on its own, from the age of the car or its wear and tear. It happens that the owner of the car himself is to blame. Agree that some things in us do not seem to be the cause of strong oxidation. For example, wrong concentration of electrolyte in the service battery, crooked installation of music, dangling wire of mass, slightly fooling alternator or its slipping belt. It seems like a small thing, but all this causes these ugly white, green, or blue growths to appear on the terminals. So if after cleaning the terminals oxides appear again, something is wrong with the car. And you should not ignore this call from the terminals. You can one fine morning not start the engine because of a dead battery, and you can simply burn the car's slowly melting wire. And it will be very offensive. In conclusion, the white, powdery substance that forms on battery terminals is a result of oxidation, typically caused by the reaction between the battery acid and the metal terminals. This buildup can lead to poor connections and reduced battery performance. To prevent and address this issue, regular maintenance is key. Cleaning the terminals with a mixture of baking soda and water can effectively remove the corrosion, while applying a protective grease can help inhibit future oxidation. By staying proactive, you can ensure your battery operates efficiently and lasts longer. Thank you for watching. And remember to keep your battery terminals clean for optimal performance.